Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we are going to talk about how do we pay for that, paying for safe routes to parks in Oregon. I can see folks kind of trickling in, so I'm going to give a minute for everybody to sign on. And in the meantime, I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, everybody. My name is Natasha Riveron. I'm the Healthy Parks and Places Manager at Safe Routes Partnership. My email is here. I'm located in Seattle, Washington, and I am very excited to be hosting today. At Safe Routes Partnership, our mission is to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and in everyday life, improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, and abilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. We've been working with the Oregon Health Authority to support safe routes to parks as a strategy, especially with increasing physical activity for older adults and managing arthritis with the Walk with Ease program. I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware before we get into the specifics of funding that we have a Oregon-specific toolkit with resources developed to help improve safe, equitable, and convenient access to parks, as well as other everyday destinations. This toolkit was developed specifically for communities in Oregon, and we developed it with the support of the Oregon Health Authority and with funding from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And it was informed by the lived and professional experiences of stakeholders and partners that we work with all across Oregon. We met with 21 individuals from 15 organizations to help inform the toolkit. And we asked what kind of tools and resources would be most useful for stakeholders working to support healthy community design and intergenerational cooperation. Stakeholders really were diverse, a group of nonprofit and public organizations working to support health, walkability, and recreation. And our team reviewed these interview results and researched funding streams, resources, and case studies in Oregon and developed the toolkit. Then we had folks read through it and tell us, is this useful? And then we made edits based on that. The toolkit really walks you through the process that we use to advance safe routes to parks all across the country and from our experience with lots of nonprofits in other states as well. And throughout the toolkit, you will find success stories of safe routes to parks funding and implementation in communities in Oregon and across the country. And the toolkit includes templates and tables to take what you're doing and make things really easy for you, like planning meeting agendas, tables for engagement, a sample press release, and social media content. It also offers over 20 ideas for funding sources and ideas for creatively using existing funding for this work. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about newer opportunities in the federal space today. And then our speakers will also talk about specific state funding. And we really walk you through steps. Each phase has specific steps and summaries. And I just really wanted to highlight that we have very specific case studies that are based in Oregon that talk about funding and different programming pieces in Oregon communities like Beaverton, Salem, Eugene, Klamath Falls, Portland, and Redmond. And so today's goals are for you guys to learn about the federal and state funding opportunities available to support safe routes to parks in Oregon, to clarify which grant opportunities could be a good fit for your community and or project, and understand short-term next steps to take if you want to pursue an opportunity. And because the reason that we're pulling this together is that creating safe, connected streets and sidewalks, often the money and having enough money to build safer facilities is one of the biggest barriers. So we want to really focus on that today. So I'm going to start this off pretty quickly with the federal funding opportunities. There's two US DOT discretionary funds that are a good fit, I think, and a good opportunity for to apply for. The most recent federal funding package for transportation made a couple exciting new opportunities available. And here is just a quick definition of discretionary grants. It means that they're awarded directly by US DOT on a competitive basis, and each program has its own guidelines, which are informed by Congress. The other type is formula funds, which each state receives on an appointment based on a formula that considers things like population, and state DOTs administer these funds based on instructions from Congress. And some of the formula funds are actually in the Community Paths program, which one of our speakers will be talking about. The first discretionary fund that I'm going to be sharing about is the Safe Streets for All grant, which the purpose is specifically around Vision Zero and towards zero deaths. There's $5 billion available over the next 5 years, and local and tribal governments, MPOs, and transit agencies are eligible applicants. And don't worry if you're not one of those. I highly recommend partnering with one of them if you are interested in getting some parks and park access projects in, as well as trail networks. It is a really good opportunity to kind of influence policies and show up and get engaged, even if you're not specifically working with one of these eligible applicants, even if you are not specifically part of this. There are 2 grant types, which the first one is that you can develop safety plans, and the second is to implement strategies. I highly recommend looking at the safety plan option, because in order to be eligible for the implementation grant, you need to have a Vision Zero safety plan. The due date is coming up. It's July 10th, 2023, and it's due at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Just wanted to underscore that. And if you have further just interest in reading, there's so many resources and recorded webinars on their website, which is right there. And again, like I mentioned, get connected to things that are happening in your community. If they do end up getting a Safe Streets for All grant, I do highly recommend engaging with that process. You can also apply in partnership. They do like multi-jurisdictional applications. A number of the awarded folks in fiscal year 22 were multi-jurisdictional. They also are considering diversity both in size and geography of applicants. So thinking like rural, small grants, thinking like that. So don't be discouraged if you're rather small. The fiscal year 22 awards, there was $800 million for 510 communities across the US. $4 million went to Oregon for specifically the planning grants, and those were on the right, you can see the communities that received planning grants. And just to give you like a little bit of context, Washington, for the planning grants, Washington received $9 million, Idaho had $1 million, and then Colorado received $6 million, just to give you a sense of like where Oregon is. Oregon also received a $20 million implementation project in Portland. So just to give you a sense, like one community got a big chunk of money for implementation and a lot more got money for planning. And so I highly recommend looking at the planning. The action planning grants, I just wanted to dive in a little bit further to these, is that you can use planning and demonstration grant funding to develop and complete a action plan or to supplement that. So you can conduct supplemental planning or conduct demonstration activities that will inform the action plan. Supplemental action plan. So if you already have some kind of Vision Zero action plan, you can enhance that existing plan with safety subplans. So those can be focused on speed management, vulnerable road users. It could be like ADA transition plans, health equity. You can look at road safety audits or do follow-up stakeholder engagement. And just there's a lot of other things that you can do, like equity assessments. The demonstration activities, you can also use like things like on the right. So you could do feasibility studies using kind of quick build strategies that inform permanent projects for the future. So you could paint, use plastic delineators to kind of experiment with changing the roadway design, removable barriers to reallocate roadway space. You can also pilot programs for behavioral or operational activities. So thinking like testing out a new education campaign messaging at a small scale, or trialing changes for how emergency medical services respond to crashes. So don't sleep on this opportunity. I know that sometimes planning grants can be less appealing than infrastructure grants just because we really want to see stuff on the road, but these plans are the pathway for getting both state and federal funding for projects, and to make you eligible for the infrastructure grants under Safe Streets for All. The second opportunity I really want to highlight is the RAISE grant, which was formerly known as Build or Tiger, and it stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, and it is to develop large-scale transportation projects with regional or national significance with a focus on projects that address climate change, ensure racial equity, and remove barriers to opportunity. And these can fund both planning and implementation. The eligibility is for state, local governments around capital and planning awards. And the application window actually is closed for 2023, but honestly, this is a perfect time to start thinking about what you want to do for the next round of applications, which is estimated to open next fall or early winter. And so, yeah, I recommend now is the time to start talking to partners and figuring out what you want to do. Recent examples of funded projects include some like bridge replacements in Tucson, planning for complete streets projects in Beaverton and Salem, a new snowmelt system in Berlin, New Hampshire. There's lots of variety with these RAISE projects, and they're reviewed and evaluated on criteria that include safety, environmental sustainability, quality of life, economic development, and opportunities for tourism as well. So something else I want to flag is that half of the funding will go to projects in rural areas, and the other half will go to urban areas. At least 15 million is specifically going to go to projects located in areas of persistent poverty or historically disadvantaged communities, which is like a specific definition. And projects located in these areas will be eligible for up to 100% federal cost share. So if you are in one of those communities, I highly recommend looking into that and seeing what kind of projects you can look for. And if you're interested in just keeping generally up to date with opportunities that can fund safe routes to parks, safe routes to school, other access improvements, I highly recommend looking at the Safe Routes Partnership federal policy blog. And we also track transportation alternatives implementation. The other piece is that we put out biannual state report cards on walking, biking, and physical activity. And then you can also email me if you're interested in one of these opportunities. We actually have time to help provide a little bit of technical assistance to communities in Oregon. So I'm happy to chat more individually with you and see what opportunities are available. Okay, so that wraps up my portion of the presentation. I am now really excited to introduce our two Oregon-based speakers. So Nohemi Enciso is with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, and she has been for 3 years administering the Land and Water Conservation Funding Program. Prior to this, she was at the Oregon Department of Aviation for 5 years, administering grant programs for Oregon's public use airports. Alan Thompson has over 30 years of transportation planning and airport planning, transportation safety, and after transportation planning from St. Louis to Los Angeles. And for the past 4 years, Alan has been developing the new Oregon Community Paths program for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And so I'm going to hand it off to Nohemi, and just for a little sense of the path moving forward, we will have a little bit of time for Q&A for Nohemi right after her presentation, and then we will also have some Q&A time after Alan's presentation. So if you have questions about Nohemi's, just be prepared to ask about it when she's finished, and then we'll hand it off to Alan Thompson. Great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and Nohemi, you can take it away.
Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so let me go ahead and see about sharing my screen here. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you so much for spending a few of your precious moments with me today, this day. My name is Naomi Enciso, and I am, like Natasha said, the Land and Water Conservation Fund Program Recreation Coordinator with Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. And today I will be sharing about some great opportunities that we offer with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we go. So on the screen here, these are our 5 Oregon Parks and Recreation grant programs that we offer Today's presentation will focus on the top 3 here listed on the screen. The other 2 are not as relevant to this group, so I'll just give you some brief information on those. The ATV grant program supports motorized recreation areas with development, maintenance, law enforcement, and emergency services. And we also have a county opportunity grant program, which is funded by a portion of RV registration fees and is available for improvement to county operated campgrounds. So lots of information. If you visit our website listed here on the bottom of the slide, there's a lot of detailed information for each of these grant programs, including schedules of funding. We have past webinars, PowerPoints, manuals. So lots of good information. If you're interested, feel free. I encourage you to visit our website and take a look. Okay, so let's start talking first with the Land and Water Conservation Fund program. Again, this is a program that I coordinate for Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. We offer a wide variety of different projects that we help to fund. So all things outdoor recreation, from restrooms, playgrounds, lighting, accessibility improvements, trails. So all things outdoor recreation. We also participate in acquisition grants to purchase property for outdoor recreation use. This is a federally funded pass-through grant program from the National Park Service. It is competitive. However, we've noticed that post-pandemic, we've received lesser applications than we have pre-pandemic. So we are seeing a slight increase in how much, how many applications we're receiving, but still it's about half of what we had typically seen before the pandemic. This program does have a 50% grant match requirement, and match sources cannot come from other federal sources, with exception to the Recreational Trails Program and the Community Development Block Grant Program, which I believe is provided by Business Oregon. Land and Water Conservation Fund program does have a minimum request of $50,000, and there's not necessarily a maximum request that you can make to the program. Eligible applicants include local units of government, federally recognized Indian tribes, and a couple of state agencies, including Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, Fish and Wildlife, Department of State Lands, and Department of Forestry. We do offer an annual grant cycle, so we solicit applications once a year, generally in early fall. One thing to keep in mind with this program is because it is a federally funded program, the process tends to be one of the longer processes between our programs, and there are a lot more requirements both with the application and once the grant is received, including in perpetuity requirements that are pretty strict. So for more information, I encourage you to visit the website and check out that information. But again, it is one of the lesser competitive funding programs that we offer. So, the next opportunity to apply will be later on this fall, and a webinar will be scheduled prior to the grant cycle opening. If you do visit the website, there is an option to sign up to receive emails directly from me with regards to the program. So generally, I'll send mass emails when we're getting ready to start soliciting applications, when there's any committee meetings. And so some of that really important information, rather than keep checking our website, if you just wanted to sign up and receive those directly from me, that's an option for you. All right, so the next program that I'd like to talk to you about today is our local government grant program. This program is pretty similar to the Land and Water program, except for the funding for this program comes from Oregon Lottery, and so it's not federally funded. Similar to Land and Water, local government funds a wide variety of public outdoor recreation facilities, same as Land and Water, including restrooms, baseball fields, access, lighting, and they also can provide acquisition grants as well for public outdoor recreation use. In the past, this program has typically had about $6 million a year in funding, and that amount of funding is expected to increase. And so as revenue goes up, the local government grant program will receive a larger share of Oregon Park and Recreation's department budget to provide us funding. Match requirements for this program vary by population and can be between 20% up to 50%. And eligible applicants include local governments, including cities, counties, metro, park and recreation districts, and port districts. There are different application types depending on your funding needs. So we offer a small grant application, which limits your request to $75,000. We also have a large grant application, which caps your request at $750,000 or $1 million if it's an acquisition grant. And then we also have master planning grants. These are limited to cities and park districts with a population of 10,000 or less, or counties with less than 50,000 people in population. And these planning grant applications are not intended for hiring a trail planner or an engineer to help you with a specific project, but rather they're intended to support small communities in their master planning processes. This program also runs on an annual grant cycle with solicitation beginning earlier in January. They just closed the small grant applications last month, and about 2 weeks ago, the period for the large deadline, the large grants applications closed. Master planning grants are coming due on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're interested, definitely check out the website and stay tuned for the next grant cycle in January of 24. Okay, so the next grant program I'd like to share about is the Recreational Trails Program. This is our other federally funded program. It's passed through from U.S. Department of Transportation's Federal Highway Administration, and of course, it's administered by the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. This program offers about $1.5 million in funding available toward annually, and eligible projects include construction of new trails, major rehabilitation of existing trails, development or improvement of trailhead and other support facilities, and the acquisition of land or easements for the purpose of trail development. Eligible trail types include motorized and water trails, as well as non-motorized trails. And this program does have a 20% match requirement. Eligible applicants include local, state, federal, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofits, so long as they've been registered with the Oregon Secretary of State for at least 3 years prior to application. The Recreational Trails Program runs on an annual grant cycle with applications anticipated to open early in the fall. A letter of intent will be due about a month later, and applications around mid-November of this year. This program, as well as all of our other grant programs, offer webinars prior to or just at the start of the grant cycle. So definitely stay tuned for that if you're interested. Okay, so the next couple of slides, I just wanted to show you some examples of projects that we have funded with all of these three programs. So we'll start with the Land and Water Conservation Fund program. We can see here this project from the city of Corvallis. We see the restroom and the playground. These are hot projects with both with the local government grant program and with the Land and Water program. These are one of the more common projects that we see. This project also provided some work with the sports court area that you can see there on your right. Here's another project. This one is Recuerdo Park. It developed a 7.5 brand new neighborhood park and natural area in an underserved area of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District. With this project, they installed hard and soft surface pathways. They installed the picnic shelter, or the picnic pavilion that we see featured on this slide. They installed accessible play equipment, community garden, and so much more. So if you're in the area, definitely check that out. Here's an example from the local government grant program. This project transformed an unimproved gravel lot located in the middle of the Hood River waterfront into a new recreation area featuring a bicycle pedestrian trail, a beach, lawn, native plants, and improved recreation access to the calm waters of the Nichols Basin. This project here that we can see was done in 2 phases. So the first phase was actually funded by a recreational trails program grant, and it constructed a boardwalk through and over one of the last remaining old growth cedar swamps on the coast. It also funded a small parking lot at the trailhead. A couple of years later, the local government grant program funded phase 2, which continued and completed the construction of the boardwalk. And just as a side note, our programs can match each other. It does require some deeper level of planning and coordination and several conversations with us, of course, but it can be done and it has been done. So something to keep in mind. And this here's a project that was funded by the Recreational Trails Program a few years ago over in the city of John Day. And last but not least, this is a project that was funded again by the Recreational Trails Program. It's the Cascade Locks Gorge Hubs project, which provided a trailhead for hikers and bikers along the historic Columbia River Highway and the Pacific Crest Trail crossing, including a restroom, a bike fix-it station, parking, and a drinking fountain. So here is my contact information, as well as contact information for the coordinators of the RTP and the LGGP program. There's our website listed again. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to one of us here on the screen or check out the website. And thank you again so much for spending some time with me this morning.
Thank you so much, Nohemi. I have some questions for you. And folks, if anybody who's tuned in, please feel free to add questions to the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. It should be the 1, 2, 3, 4th from the left, and you can add a question. First of all, Nohemi, so it seems like, so for the Land Water Conservation Fund, with the 50% match requirement, can you dive in a little bit into how you've seen communities meet that match requirement? Because I know that sometimes that's a big barrier for folks. Are there any particular tips that you would have or opportunities you would want to highlight about how to meet that match?
Yes, definitely. So the match for not just the Land and Water program, but for these 3 programs, does not necessarily need to be cash match. So we can accept match such as in-kind, we can accept volunteer labor, we can accept donated equipment and materials, and a slew of different grants if you wanted to partner with different foundations or private funding, or even other, like I said, we can help provide match to one another's programs. So lots of opportunities. So if it's not necessarily in your agency's, allotted budget, you can seek other opportunities, or if you have, again, in-kind labor that you wanted to provide as part of the match, that's acceptable. With the local government grant program, they can accept if you've acquired property that you're now developing, and it's been within the last 6 years that you've acquired that property, the value of that land can count towards the match for your project. So that's not the case with the Land and Water or the Recreational Trails program, but that is something to consider if you're interested in applying for that program and have purchased property within the last 6 years.
Great, thank you. Another question, I guess, is the local government grant program, can that be used as a match for a Land Water Conservation Fund?
It can, and it has. So in the last couple of years, we've seen a project. Yes, we've seen various projects fund one another. So right now, I have an active project, for instance, that is using both land and water and recreational trails program. In the past, we've seen recreational trails program and local government be used on the same project. And then I also have projects that I'm working with that have local government as match. So yes.
Great. And then my other question is just an opportunity really to expand on something you mentioned, which is that, that these various grant programs can fund things like restrooms, signage, and things that make it easier to either like plan a trip to a park or like access those spaces. Because I know that signage can be huge. Knowing that there's benches and restrooms at a place makes it something that people feel safer to go. I'm curious if you want to highlight any other like supportive facilities or items that can be paid for with some of these grants.
Yeah, so all of those things that you've mentioned are things that we can assist pay for. We see all things including site furnishings, picnic shelters, barbecue, definitely, wayfinding signage. So generally what we say, if it's outdoor recreation and it's helping to support the recreation at the site that you're applying for, then generally it's acceptable. But if there's questions, feel free to touch base with each of us individually to learn more. But generally, all of those things that you've mentioned are eligible types of elements of a project.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Nohemi. I think that's really important just because when we're talking about safe routes to parks, like the physical connection is something that's important, but also like activating the space and making it a really pleasant place to be is also really important. And it seems like these grants are a great opportunity for that.
Definitely.
Great. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. If anything comes up, folks, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A box at the bottom. But in the meantime, we can pass it off to Alan Thompson with the Community Paths program. Alan, if you want to share your screen and come off mute, it is your turn.
There we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Thompson. I'm the Oregon Community Paths Program Manager at ODOT. Nice to meet you all, even though you're all quiet.
Yeah.
So today I'm going to talk about, we have a grant for that. And these are a lot of the grant programs that ODOT has. Some may be specific to trails accessing parks, but it's just a general idea of what all is offered. And the idea is that all too often you hear about a grant that is eligible and you try to shoehorn a project into that grant because you just heard about it. You're doing things at the last minute. What we want to do is let you know what all opportunities there are available, let you start preparing as early as possible for the best grant that best fits the project that you want. So that's the goal for this presentation. And trying to go through the next slide. There we go. So key questions that we have is who are we? What are the grants? How can you apply? The spotlight on some individual grants and answer any questions you may have. So who are we? We're ODOT. We're the Public Transportation Division where most of active transportation sits. We have Safe Routes to School or Community Paths, new programs such as the Innovative Mobility Program. And our climate office started up a couple of years ago, and they have a new grant program as well called the Carbon Reduction Program. And of course, we're the government, so we're going to have tons and tons of acronyms, FLAP, IMP, STIF. So anytime that I give an acronym without describing what it is, let me know and I'll make sure that it gets answered. So here are some of the grants that we have. And notice these are color-coded by the funding source. So for state funding, we have statewide Transportation Improvement Fund discretionary and the small city allotment. This also known as the SCA. Safe Routes to School is both state and federal. The Oregon Community Pass is also state and federal. The Carbon Reduction Program is federal. The Federal Lands Access Program, which is a really cool program, also known as FLAP, is federal. And Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, also known as CMAQ. And I mentioned before the Innovative Mobility Program, that is also state and federal. And here's a rather complicated table that I need to figure out how to make a little bit more friendly, is some of the things that can be done and what grant programs do we have that can fund that. So if you're looking at paving gravel roads, we can use congestion mitigation, we can use federal lands access program, we can use small city allotment. So many different programs will fund bike lanes and sidewalks and crosswalks, but only a few will fund the separated bike lanes or multi-use paths. And the reason for that is that the Oregon Constitution prohibits state funds to be, state gas tax funds, what's paid at the pump, to be used on anything other than a roadway. And then, of course, we have bus service to parks and forests, expanded bus service and buses, bus stops, infrastructure, and micromobility. So these are all different programs. And of course, every program has its own caveats, restrictions, eligibility requirements, etc. And here are some of the general ones that I'm just going to go over really briefly. Congestion mitigation, air quality, it's $20 million annually. It's federal, a 10.27% match is required. The projects must address a specific congestion reduction or air quality. It's a continuous project. Who is eligible? You have to be in a non-attainment area, and there's only a few non-attainment areas in the state, usually very urban areas. So your MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, would be the best point of contact. Now, the FLAP are entities that are responsible for highway, road, bridge, or trails adjacent to or touching federal lands. And that's about a little over $30 million annually. Again, federal a match. And the projects must connect to or touch federal lands. And these can be bike paths, they can be trails, they can be a host of things. And you have to partner with the entity that owns the land. So it could be the Bureau of Land Management, it could be the United States Forest Service, it could be the Park Service, but you have to partner with that entity, and of course be an entity that is adjacent to those areas. The small city allotment is incorporated cities of less than $5,000 population. $5 million annually is awarded with a $100,000 maximum award. It's for on-road safety, capacity, or urgent preservation. Sidewalks can be used, bike lanes can be done, and you would contact Dina Edgar, and that is usually about June of every year. And then the STIF, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, that's have to be a transit provider for to be able to apply for that. And there's a 20% match, and projects that improve, expand, or maintain services. And just to go back, because this is transit, the FLAP program has funded access to parks, transit access. So there is a bus access that will go to Mount Hood that is funded through FLAP, as an example. Anyway, Frank Thomas is the interim person to contact for the STIF, Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. So let's talk about the Safe Routes School Program, and that's managed by Sal Posadas and Heidi Manlove for education. So one of the best things about Safe Routes to School is that it has its own vision. It's unique, and we do a lot of funding programs, and we say we fund this, but we don't really say what the vision is. And so they worked with their steering committee and came up with a vision of what they want the Safe Routes School Program to accomplish. And it envisions a future where all Oregon students and families can choose and access safe, active, or shared transportation options for the school commute. And to make this vision into a reality, now we get into how they do it. Invest and evaluate safe construction, education encouragement, prioritizes underserved communities for program resources, builds and leverages partnerships, and commits to evolving transparent communication and evaluation that engage and support communities. So it really is a partnership, and wants to be one that works with communities in partnership with those communities. And so in 2022, for example, they funded $32 million in construction projects and $1.4 million in education. But the need is so much greater. You have $80 million in funds that were requested, and education is 1.4, so it's not quite the same in terms of the applying. So that is just, education is something we get every year, and it gets doled out fairly well. So the next grant solicitation is early 2024. So education application in February with allocation in October. Should be about $2 million for that. Construction application is also in February with allocation in January of 2025, and there's $26 million for that. And those will be state funds. And then planning assistance, including transit partners, will also be happening in February. And that, what the planning assistance does is that it helps communities prepare safe routes to school plans. And so here's an example of who's eligible: school districts, tribes, counties, and road authorities. And for education, you can get education service districts and transit districts. Match required 12% for federal, for the education, which is federal. And then for the safe routes to school infrastructure, it's 40%, but it can be reduced depending upon need. And what's eligible are safety projects on the public right-of-way within 1 mile of the school. And then it's a 2-year funding cycle biennially for both. And then the planning assistance, it's not a grant, but it's for consultant services to create a local safe route school plan. And it's so important is that it's so hard to apply for a construction grant if you don't have a plan in place in advance. So developing a plan helps set you up for success when you are applying for construction. And that's true in not just Safe Routes School, but just about any program. And here are the contacts, and there'll be more at the very end of the presentation. Oregon Community Pass Program. This is my program. And it's a competitive grant program that invests in off-road walking facilities that are not primarily along a roadway. We look at 2 main categories: critical links, and think of critical links as a first and last mile to destinations. So biking and walking connections to schools, downtown, shopping, employment, and other destinations where you might have a large quantity of people that would want to go there. So that could be a larger park. It could be a riverfront park. It could be the ocean views along the coast. And then, of course, regional paths, which are longer distance paths serving communities. Think about the Bear Creek Greenway in Southern Oregon, Portland Springwater Corridor. Thinking ahead, I'm always hearing about the 40-mile loop and how everyone's still working on the 40-mile loop, and how this could be something that could work into portions of that. And of course, crossings. We allow crossings because you can't just have a path stop at a roadway and not being able to cross it to get to the other side, to the other portion of the path. So we look at how we can get across these roadways. In 2020, the very first year we had this program, we funded 21 projects, 6 preliminary planning. Remember what I said about planning? We want to plan so that you can be able to construct later. And since off-road paths for transportation purposes there was no funding before because we didn't have it except for state, there were very few plans. So we really wanted to focus on the plans. So we had 1.5 million for planning and 13.7 million for construction. For the cycle that we are just getting ready to make recommendations, we are recommending about 9 preliminary planning grants, about $3 million, and about $33 million in construction grants. So there's a whole lot more that's coming through. We've increased funding tremendously for this program, although the demand in the 2020 cycle was 105 million, and we had about 15.2 million, and we had 103 million in demand when we first did our pre-applications in 2022, and we had 37 million. So the demand does not go down, it seems. Now, who's eligible? Any local public agency or tribe. Nonprofits can apply, but they have to partner with an otherwise eligible entity. When that's because the first cycle we had a lot of PTA come in asking for construction money, and it's very difficult to give construction funds to PTA because they have no experience in constructing. So, and that's just an extreme example. So we prefer to have partner with a local public agency in order to be able to dole the money out more efficiently and make sure that there are no problems in terms of how we account for the money and do the invoicing, et cetera, et cetera. How much money is available for planning? Now, this is the first 30% planning where we go and do the initial concept, develop alternatives, develop a final alternative. What we want out of this is a final recommended project with a technical scoping and budget so that we're all set to apply for construction. For construction, we have two separate pots. We have a state pot, which we use for smaller projects. That's $200,000 to $1 million. And that requires a 30% match. The good news is that because it's the state funds, is that we can go back 10 years. So if you've done previous planning work, let's say that you have this project and it was part of a safe route school plan that you developed, that money that you used for that safe route school plan can count towards that match, even though it was done prior to. We can't do that with federal funds because the federal requirements are such that you can't spend money before the grant is executed. So we use that for larger funds, and that has a 10.27% match. And the reason why that has a smaller match when it's a larger project is because federal projects require greater resources to administer. We have a program called certification where we certify local agencies to administer federal grants for ODOT. And out of the entire state, every city and county, there's only 11 entities that have certified themselves to do that. Otherwise, ODOT does the work for you. And then there's that cost, and ODOT will hire a consultant, and the consultant will have their administrative costs. So the costs add up a lot with federal funds. So anyway, the eligibility is, priority off-system multi-use bicycle or foot paths that are first, last mile, the critical links, or that they connect communities. It's every 2 years. The next application cycle will start a year from August. We'll have about $28 million in federal funds and $4 million in state estimated. And that's it for community paths, but let me go on to some more, as I'd say, but wait, there's more. There's the carbon reduction program, which is brand new. Ry Berg is the climate program coordinator. As you can tell, we gave this presentation last week to the Oregon Active Transportation Summit. That was actually 2 weeks ago. And that was created a new carbon reduction program to reduce carbon emissions, a total of $82 million for the next 5 years, and funds projects in transportation management areas. Those are the big areas, greater than 200,000 population in the metropolitan area. So that would be Portland, Eugene, Salem, those metropolitan areas. Then small urban and rural areas that are less than $200,000. And then, of course, there's a statewide program which we can give to just about anyone we want. So that's, but it requires a carbon reduction strategy. And here's, for example, the small urban and rural call for projects: $24 million in one-time federal funds, $13 million for the first round, remainder in early 2024. Cities, counties, tribal governances, and transportation agencies are available. Match for projects 10.27. As you can tell, this is all federal funding. And the priority project types: vehicle and fuel technology and transportation options. Since the focus of this is on access to parks and other public areas. So can we extend public transportation service, connectivity, transit stops, and operations? Can we implement transportation demand management programs? And that could include bike share. It could include various other strategies, all designed to get people out of their cars. And invest in strategic active transportation and public transit networks. And of course, support shared mobility. So system operations, invest in traffic management and intersection technologies, expand ITS, which is intelligent transportation systems. When you think about signal timing and how they can, you see the little cameras up there that even though there's not a traffic light camera as in penalty for traffic violations, those use ITS to look at the traffic and then be able to get the signals to change at a more reasonable time. And also how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from agency operations, materials, and fuels. And support methods to price roadway system with considerations for equity impacts, location, and recovering costs from environmental impacts. So ODOT is going green. So projects must reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Projects that have the potential to reduce more emissions and or reduce emissions sooner will be more likely to be funded. So again, the closer you are to construction, the more priority that we give to you. Strategic active transportation investments is a key consideration. And who's eligible? Again, cities, counties, tribal governments, transportation agencies, and then urban and rural areas. How much money? 24 million over 2 funding cycles. And then applications are due May 31st. So it's coming up on the very end of that application cycle. And stay connected with B. Ryberg. And I also want to point out another grant program that just released last week, and that is the Transportation Growth Management Program. And what they do is they provide 2 types of planning grants, one for transportation system plans and one for corridor area plans. And so those also work to help to develop the plans that then develop the criteria necessary for construction projects. And that grant cycle is going on now, and you just have to Google Oregon ODOT Transportation Growth Management Program or Transportation Growth Management Grants, and it should pop up. And that grant cycle is happening right now as we speak. So the Innovative Mobility Program, ran by Dorian Pacheco, it provides funding to community-based organizations and local agencies to make it easier for underserved groups to get to where they need to go. It delivers within ODOT's climate and equity lenses and builds capacity and removes barriers to accessing public and active transportation. So this is micromobility. So we're looking at how we link to other modes of transportation. So how do we get from a house to a bus stop? How do we, if we're not getting into land use, how can we do things for short trips so we don't have to use vehicles or motor vehicles, I should say? There's 20 million available through 2027, $10 million via the State Transportation Operating Fund. And that is a fund that's used through, let's say, the lawnmower gas tax. So if you're getting gas for your lawnmower, it doesn't go into the state highway fund, which means that it can be used for a whole host of other things. It's not nearly as restricted. And the other one is through Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That is a federal program that funds part of my program, has helped fund part of Safe Routes to School. And so that is a temporary program that's going to go away once that money is expended. But that is another thing that we're using to leverage state funds. Equity is primary criteria for funding decisions. It can be van pool, bike, scooter lending libraries, minor infrastructure projects, micro mobility, and first mile, last mile connections. And so right now they have the initial outreach. They have open micro grants of $5,000. And then it goes into design and then the launch of the major program. So when we start talking about the first large grants and contracts awarded, which will be in this winter, we don't know what the amount will be per grant, but they're still developing that. We should have that. We should have that around September, October. Should have that amount available, but that's what we're proposing for that future. And then again, right now we have micro grants up to $5,000 are available on a rolling basis with no deadline. Local regional governments, tribes, public schools, universities, nonprofits, and businesses providing community services are eligible. And large grants open later on this year. And then Dorian's contact information. And here's all of them. So if you're going to do a screen capture, you want to do this right now. So I'll just leave it right here and talk and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks so much, Alan. I have a question for you, which is, if do you have advice for groups? So like, say somebody's tuning in and they're like, I haven't applied for a state grant before to pay for infrastructure, but I want to, say, fix my sidewalks or add a crosswalk or maybe like a crossing treatment for a trail. Like, what would be your advice on like the first 2-3 steps to take after today?
Well, the first one is, is always, what is it you want to do? What is the project? What is it you want to accomplish? That's always the first step. And then you start looking at these various grant programs and find which is the best one to be able to fund that project. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, sometimes you just say, hey, there's money available, this new grant program, let's squeeze something in there, and you're trying to put that circle into that square hole. So one, know what you want to do. Number two, look for the best program that can then accomplish what you that task, and then start working on the application well in advance. Contact the program manager, ask questions, find out how the best way. Ask if there's any previous grant applications, from previous cycles that you can look at. And us being ODOT, those are public information, so we'll be happy to give them to you. And so that gives you an idea of what we're looking for. You can see the list of projects of what was funded previously. You can look at the demand to see how competitive it is. So those are all things that you can do. And all it is just doing your homework and being able to then plan. And smaller communities in particular, this helps a lot, because you often are very, very short staffed, and you have one person handling many, many roles. So by having this, you can get the most bang for the buck, and you're not putting in resources with a very limited ability to achieve those goals. So you really want to maximize your productivity for something that you can accomplish.
That's great. So basically, like, identify the program first that fits best with your project, and like really being early on. It does seem like oftentimes people find out about things like, when just when the application window closed, and they're like, oh no, but it's like, that's like the perfect time to start thinking about applying for the next cycle. And that's a great tip about being able to ask about successful applications that might like fit the profile of your community. That's great. I don't see any other questions. Folks, if you have additional questions, please put them in now. Alan, I really appreciate this really thorough presentation, and we will be sharing out the recording of this as well, so you guys can come back to this as well. Before we close, I just want to emphasize that if you are interested in Safe Routes to Parks, building on work that you're doing, kicking off some work, especially that now that it's summer, I highly recommend looking into our free Safe Routes to Parks coaching sessions. So if you are interested in chatting with somebody, maybe like for 30 minutes, an hour, about Safe Routes to Parks and what you're doing in your community, we are available for that, and we have sessions available in both May and June. So feel free to email me at natasha@saferoutespartnership.org to connect on that. And other than that, thank you so much to our speakers today. Thank you so much for those who joined us. And we will be following up with an email with all of the recordings and information. So hope you all have a great day.